At 6 a.m., the first scream of an ATV engine ripped through my soybean field, and then I saw her. Designer sunglasses. Music blasting. Tires chewing up my crop rows like confetti. I thought it was a mistake, until she waved like she owned the land. She didn't know one thing: this was cattle country. At 6 a.m., the first scream of an ATV engine tore through my soybean field like a saw through plywood. I was halfway awake, barefoot, coffee still brewing, and my first thought, honestly, was that some teenager had gotten lost. A farm kid, maybe. A wrong turn. A quick sorry, sir, and it would be done. Then I stepped onto my porch in my pajamas and saw the rider. Grown woman. Designer sunglasses. Bright white sneakers that had never known real mud. A Bluetooth speaker strapped to her handlebars blasting music so loud the bass made my porch railing vibrate. She wasn't creeping along the edge either. She was cutting straight through my crop rows like she was carving her name into the earth. And the worst part? She waved at me. Like I was the neighbor watching her drive by on a Sunday stroll. Her tires crushed half an acre of fresh sprouts in seconds, leaving behind snapped plants, shredded dirt, and a sweet chemical cloud that smelled like strawberry vape. By the time my brain caught up and I opened my mouth to yell, she was already gone, engine fading, music fading, my field left looking like it had been trampled by a small stampede with wheels. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at the damage and feeling something hot and sharp rise in my chest. Farming isn't a hobby for me. It's not cute countryside content. It's my living. Every row of soybeans is time, money, and sweat. And whoever that was, she didn't just take a joyride. She cut into my year. I tried to be civilized. I really did. The next day I walked to the nearest house in the direction she'd come from. It was one of those newer places that looked like they were dropped into the countryside by a helicopter, clean driveway, bright paint, landscaping that hadn't lost a single leaf. A teenager opened the door, looked me up and down like I was a salesman, then yelled over his shoulder, "Aunt Amanda. Some dude's here." When she appeared, I knew immediately. Same sunglasses. Same attitude. An ATV helmet hanging from her elbow like a trophy. She leaned on the doorframe and listened to me the way people listen to a car alarm they don't plan on fixing. I kept my voice calm anyway. I told her she'd damaged my crops. I told her she was trespassing. I told her there were penalties for riding a motor vehicle through planted rows, and that if she got hurt on my property, it could become a legal nightmare for both of us. She shrugged like I'd just told her the weather forecast. I asked her, politely, to stop. She smirked. Then she said, "Prove it." I blinked. "Prove you're trespassing?" "Prove I was there," she said, like it was a game. "People ride around here all the time." I stared at her for a second, trying to decide if I'd walked into a prank. But her face didn't move. She wasn't joking. Then came the line. The one people like her always have loaded in the chamber. "I'm friends with the mayor," she said, flipping her hair like it was a badge. "And the HOA president. So you might want to back off." My mouth opened and closed once before words returned. "This is my farm." She gave a bored little sigh. "Your field is empty and boring. I'm not hurting anything. And I'll probably be back tomorrow." The door shut with a soft click that somehow felt louder than her ATV engine. I walked home with my jaw tight, replaying the conversation over and over, like my brain couldn't accept that a grown adult had looked me in the eyes and basically said, "I'll do what I want, and you can't stop me." The next morning, the engine came back. This time she brought her dog. The dog was riding in a milk crate duct taped to the back of the ATV like a carnival act. The crate bounced as she sped along, and the dog looked thrilled, tongue out, ears flapping, living its best life while my soybean sprouts died under 4 thick tires. I tried taking photos. She flipped me off without even turning her head, like she'd done it 1,000 times. I put up signs, "Private property, no trespassing, cattle area beyond this point," and she ran one over like she was aiming for it. I called the local sheriff's department. The deputy who answered sounded tired before I even finished explaining. Yeah, he said. We've had some calls. Some calls about her? I asked. A pause. Then, we'll look into it. I waited. Nothing happened. For a week, it became routine. The ATV would roar in at sunrise. Sometimes she came at noon. Sometimes late afternoon. Once, I heard the engine after dark and found fresh tracks near my back fence. Every time I went outside, she seemed to treat me like part of the scenery, like I was a scarecrow with opinions. And the damage kept stacking up. Irrigation markers snapped. Soil packed down. Rows flattened. One morning, I found a crushed line where I'd laid out a new section for runoff control, the plastic tubing shredded like a toy. I did the math after the first week and felt my stomach drop. Not catastrophic yet, but enough that if it continued, it would show up in the yield. Enough that I'd feel it. Then she started bringing friends. The first time, I heard multiple engines and thought something was wrong with my equipment. I stepped outside and saw 3 ATVs crisscrossing my field like it was their personal track. They weren't even trying to hide. They parked under my oak tree, pulled out folding chairs, and sat there like they were at a picnic spot they'd booked. Amanda pointed toward my barn like she was giving a tour. One of her friends laughed and took selfies in front of my fence line. I called animal control when her unleashed dog started chasing my chickens. The response was almost worse than the sheriff's. We can make a note, the woman said, like she was writing down a grocery list. A note won't unflatten my crops, I snapped. She cleared her throat. Sir, do you have video? That night, I bought 2 trail cameras. I installed them the next day, one on a post, one disguised in an old weatherproof box I mounted like a birdhouse. I tested the angles twice. I set motion alerts. I felt ridiculous, like I was building a security system for a museum, except my museum was dirt and plants and the right to be left alone. Within 48 hours, I had footage of Amanda riding in, weaving between rows, stopping to take a video of herself, and then, like the cherry on top, tossing an empty soda can into my compost pile. I watched it 3 times because I couldn't believe it. I printed still frames and drove them straight to the sheriff's office. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to yell. I just wanted to put evidence in someone's hands and force the situation to become real. The deputy at the desk looked at the photos. He frowned. He flipped to the next one. His frown deepened. Then he said, "That's Amanda." My eyes narrowed. "You know her." He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for years. "Yeah." "And?" He glanced over his shoulder at the back offices, then lowered his voice. "She's the mayor's niece." It wasn't even the words that hit me. It was the way he said them, like that was the end of the conversation. Like her being related to the right person turned my land into an optional rule zone. "So she can just destroy my crops?" I asked. "No," he said quickly, too quickly. "No, that's not what I'm saying." "It kind of is." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I'll file the report. We'll talk to her." I left with a copy number and that same hollow feeling I'd been walking around with all week, like I was the only person taking my own property seriously. I went home and tried to put up a barbed wire fence along the entry path she favored. Not a full perimeter fence, that takes time and money, but enough to block the main cut-through. The next day, she ran it over. I found broken posts and a snapped strand dragged through the mud like a prank. She'd done it on purpose. There wasn't even an attempt to pretend it was an accident. That was the moment my patience started turning into something else. Not rage exactly. Rage burns fast. This was colder. This was the feeling of realizing you were dealing with someone who didn't respond to normal consequences because consequences had never applied to her. That night it rained hard. One of those soaking storms that turns the world into a blur and makes the soil heavy. I went to bed listening to water drum against the roof, and in the back of my mind I thought, good. The field will be too soft. She won't ride tomorrow. At dawn, I heard the engine anyway. Only this time, it didn't move like usual. It roared, then sputtered, then roared again like an animal stuck in a trap. I stepped outside with my coffee and saw her near the southern stretch of the property, close to the far pasture line where the land dips and the grass grows taller. She was standing on one of my old scarecrow posts, clinging to it like a terrified bird. Her ATV was sunk halfway into the mud pit I'd been prepping for a new irrigation line. One wheel spun uselessly, spraying sludge. And Amanda, this woman who had waved at me like she owned the place, was screaming into her phone. I thought she was being dramatic until I saw what had her frozen. Something big moved through the tall grass near the pasture. Something brown and broad-shouldered, snorting in slow, annoyed bursts. Not rushing. Not charging. Just approaching with the steady confidence of an animal that knows exactly where it is. My coffee paused halfway to my mouth. Because that wasn't just cattle area in theory. That was the cattle. And at the front of that quiet movement was the biggest bull on my land. He didn't look angry. That was the scary part. He looked curious. Calm. Like he was evaluating an unexpected object on his morning route. Amanda finally saw him clearly and her scream changed pitch, sharp, panicked, real. She looked toward my porch like I was supposed to teleport in and save her from the consequences of her own tires. And I stood there, coffee in hand, watching the exact moment she realized this field wasn't empty. It wasn't boring. It wasn't hers. It was a cattle area. And she had ridden straight into it. She kept screaming like volume could rewrite reality. Get him away! Get that thing away from me! Her voice carried over the wet field, bouncing off the barn and cutting through the morning quiet. The bull, massive, slow, steady, stopped at the edge of the taller grass and stared at her like she was an unsolved problem. I didn't run out there. Not yet. Because with cattle, especially a bull that size, you don't sprint into a scene like a hero in a movie. You read the animal. You respect distance. You move in a way that doesn't turn curiosity into irritation. Amanda didn't know any of that. She just kept flailing on top of the scarecrow post, clutching her phone and shouting into it, "I'm trapped. There's an aggressive animal. This farmer is doing this on purpose." I walked down the porch steps slowly, keeping my posture relaxed, my arms down, my eyes on the bull first, not her. The bull snorted again, more annoyed by the noise than anything else. His tail flicked once. That was it. "Amanda," I called, calm but loud enough to carry, "stop screaming." She snapped her head toward me like she couldn't believe I'd spoken. "Stop screaming," I repeated. "You're making it worse." "How dare you," she started. "Listen," I cut in, still watching the bull. "He's not charging you. He's watching. If you keep yelling, you might annoy him." That got her quiet for half a second. Half a second was enough to hear the wet squelch of her boots shifting on the post. "I'm calling animal control," she hissed, like it was a threat. "Call whoever you want," I said. "But you're going to stay where you are until I can get you out safely." "I don't need you," she shouted. Then her foot slipped a little and she squealed, grabbing tighter like the post was a lifeline. The bull took one slow step forward and stopped again. Not aggressive. Not playful. Just present. Heavy. Confident. Amanda's voice dropped into a shaky fury. "This is harassment. You trained that thing to stalk me." I almost laughed, but I didn't. "Not yet. I trained my cattle to be cattle," I said. "And I posted signs. You ran them over." She opened her mouth, then closed it, then switched tactics like a person changing apps on a phone. "You can't have a bull near a public trail," she shouted. "This isn't a public trail," I said. "It's my land." "It's unregulated farmland," she snapped. "People ride out here all the time." "Not through planted rows," I said. She lifted her phone like a lawyer holding evidence. "I've got followers watching this. If anything happens to me, you're done. I stared at her, then at the bull. The bull blinked slowly, unimpressed. I walked to my fence line and grabbed a long rope I kept coiled near the gate. I didn't cross into the open area between her and the bull. I stayed smart. I stayed safe. Amanda, I called, I'm going to toss you the rope. You can use it to steady yourself and step down on the far side. Away from him. She stared at the rope like I'd offered her a snake. I'm not touching that, she said. You'll yank me down. I stared. What? You're trying to set me up, she snapped. Like some kind of trap. I blinked slowly, because that was the exact level of paranoia you get when someone's been acting untouchable for too long. Everything becomes a conspiracy the moment reality shows up. You're on a scarecrow post, I said flatly. You want to get down or not? She hesitated, then shook her head like she was rejecting a bad deal. No. I'm waiting for help. Behind her, her ATV tires spun again for a second. Someone must have bumped the throttle by accident. Mud sprayed. The sound made the bull flick an ear and shift his weight. Amanda saw the movement and screamed again. I raised my voice. Amanda! Quiet. She shut up abruptly, breathing hard, eyes wide behind the sunglasses. For the first time since this started, she looked small. Not because I'd outplayed her. Because she'd finally met something that didn't care who she knew. A truck engine rumbled in the distance. Then another. Headlights appeared on the road beyond my field's edge. Someone she'd called had actually come. 2 minutes later, a man in a clean jacket and spotless boots jogged up to the fence line like he'd just stepped out of a city meeting and into a nightmare. He looked at Amanda on the post, the stuck ATV, the bull, and then, finally, at me. Oh my God, he said. What is happening? Amanda shrieked his name like he was a superhero. Brad. Get me out of here. He's letting his bull attack me. Brad stared at the bull. The bull stared back. Brad swallowed. Can it jump the fence? No, I said. But you shouldn't test it. Brad turned toward me, trying to recover authority. Sir, we're going to need you to secure your animal. My animal is secured, I said. It's on my property, in its pasture area. She rode into it. Amanda's voice went high and furious again. This isn't a pasture. It's a field. It's empty. It's connected land, I said. And there are cattle access points. That's why the signs exist. Brad squinted at the muddy mess like the truth was starting to poke through his denial. Amanda, did you ride through here again? She snapped, it doesn't matter. It does, I said. Because that's why you're stuck. And that's why you're on a scarecrow post. Brad looked like he wanted to disappear. I didn't want anyone hurt. I wanted this to end. So I made a decision. I opened the gate to my side, not the open field side, and walked the fence line slowly toward the pasture latch, staying calm, speaking softly in a steady voice I used with the cattle. The bull watched me. He knew me. He wasn't the problem. The chaos was the problem. I reached the latch and checked it. Rain had loosened the ground under the post, and the hinge had shifted. That's how the bull had wandered closer than usual. My mistake, but not a malicious one. I secured it fully, then stepped back, still calm. The bull turned his head once, like he'd decided the entertainment was over, and began walking away. Slow, heavy steps fading back into the taller grass. Amanda watched him go like she didn't trust the fact that danger could walk away without being chased. Now, I called, I'm tossing the rope. Take it or don't. This time, she didn't argue. She reached for it with shaking hands, looped it around the post, and used it like a railing. She climbed down slowly, boots sliding in mud, and stumbled backward toward Brad like she'd escaped a disaster that was somehow everyone's fault but hers. Brad and I worked together to tow her ATV out with his truck. I didn't enjoy helping her. But I enjoyed the fact that she had to accept it. That she had to stand there, silent and muddy, while I did the thing she'd refused to do for weeks, act like an adult. The moment her ATV was free, she climbed onto it and glared at me from behind her sunglasses. "You're going to regret this," she said. I nodded once. "Stop trespassing." She revved the engine hard, spraying mud, and peeled away toward the road. Brad lingered for a second, looking embarrassed. "Sorry," he muttered, like the word could patch a field. I didn't answer. I just watched them go. Because I knew something now. That scarecrow post moment hadn't taught Amanda respect. It had taught her fear. And fear doesn't make people like her stop. Fear makes them retaliate. 2 days later, the retaliation arrived in my mailbox like clockwork. One envelope from the HOA. One from Animal Control. One from a law office with a name so dramatic it sounded like a reality TV contestant. The HOA letter accused me of creating an unsafe environment by allowing aggressive agricultural elements to roam free. I reread that phrase 3 times. Aggressive agricultural elements. I laughed so hard I almost choked on my iced tea. Animal Control's notice said a complaint had been filed claiming my bull had been used to intimidate a resident. The law office letter was a cease and desist that read like someone had discovered legal terms 5 minutes before writing it. It warned me to restrain my livestock weapon and cease hostile intimidation tactics. I pinned all 3 to my fridge under a cow-shaped magnet like they were trophies. Amanda wanted to turn this into a war of paperwork, gossip, and intimidation. She wanted me stressed. She wanted me defensive. She wanted me to shrink. Instead, I started installing more cameras. High resolution. Night vision. Motion alerts. Cloud backup. If she wanted proof, she was going to get it in 4K. Within a week, I had footage from multiple angles, her entering at sunrise, drifting between rows, stopping to film herself like she was making an off-road documentary, and laughing while her dog jumped out and chased my chickens. I caught her tossing trash twice. I caught her pausing to take selfies with my cows like they were theme park attractions. I caught her friends doing the same. And then I saw something that made my skin go cold. A small camera, not mine, mounted near the corner of my workshop roof. I climbed up, examined it, and found it connected to a cloud-based app. It was pointed straight at my property, my field, my barn, my fence line. Amanda had planted surveillance on my land. I stared at it for a long moment, then carefully removed it. I didn't smash it. I didn't get dramatic. I turned it toward the road and left it recording the neighbor's sprinkler system, plastic flamingos getting misted every morning like a weird suburban ballet. If she wanted footage, she could enjoy that. That's when I stopped thinking about this like a problem. I started thinking about it like an ending I needed to build. Not a violent ending. Not a reckless ending. A final ending. Something safe, legal, undeniable. Because as long as Amanda could twist the story, she'd keep coming. So I decided I would stop fighting her with words. I would fight her with receipts. And I wouldn't do it by using a bull like a weapon, because I'm not an idiot and I'm not cruel. But I could do something much more powerful. I could let her walk straight into the reality she'd been ignoring. One morning at the local diner, I overheard her bragging in a booth near the window. I wasn't trying to listen. Her voice just carried like she believed the whole room was her audience. "I'm doing one last big ride," she said, waving her phone. "A huge loop. I'm going to show everyone that farmer can't scare me. He thinks he owns the whole area." Her friends laughed. My hand tightened around my coffee mug. Because I knew exactly what one last big ride meant. More damaged crops. More flattened rows. More excuses. But this time, she'd said something else too. She said she'd be filming it. She was bringing an audience. And if she was bringing an audience, then the smartest thing I could do wasn't to hide. It was to let the camera see the truth. I went home and prepared for 3 days. I reinforced the cattle fencing and checked every latch twice. I made sure all gates were properly secured, because the last thing I wanted was a real danger situation. I placed warning signs again at the entry point, big ones, hard to miss, and I positioned my cameras so they captured every angle without needing me to step into the middle of anything. I even called the sheriff's office, not to beg for help, but to document what I was doing, safety checks, signage, and the ongoing trespass with timestamps. The deputy who answered sounded tired again, until I said I had all of it on video. He went quiet. Then he said, "Send it." I did. The next morning, just after sunrise, I saw movement at the usual entry point. Amanda rolled up like she was arriving at a stage. 2 ATVs behind her. One with a woman wearing leopard print leggings and a GoPro strapped to her head. The other with a man in loafers and khakis and a sport coat that had no business within 30 miles of a soybean field. Amanda had duct taped a ring light to the front of her handlebars. A ring light. In a farm field. She was narrating into her phone like she was making a heroic documentary about reclaiming land. She pointed dramatically at my soybeans like they were evidence in a courtroom. I stayed out of sight near the barn corner, watching on my phone through a live camera feed. She revved her engine and shouted, "Let's do this." Her friends cheered. She drove forward, tires crunching into the edge of my rows. And then something else entered the frame, farther back, behind a reinforced line where the cattle area began. A big shape. Slow steps. Calm breathing. Not charging. Not raging. Just existing. Just being there. Amanda didn't notice at first. She was too busy performing. But the moment she glanced sideways and saw what else was in that field, what lived on that land, her entire posture changed. Her bravado snapped like a dry twig. The engines behind her stuttered. The GoPro friend's laughter died instantly. The man in loafers lifted his hands like he could lawyer his way out of gravity. Amanda's ATV hit a soft patch of ground and jolted. She nearly tipped. Her tire spun mud and she shrieked, trying to reverse. Then she screamed the sentence I'd been waiting weeks to hear. "Why are there cows here?" I stared at the live feed and took a slow sip of coffee. Because there it was. The truth. The thing she treated like a joke. She drove an ATV through my field for fun and never once considered that farmland isn't empty. It's working land. It has animals. It has boundaries. It has consequences. And in that moment, the cattle area wasn't a sign anymore. It was reality standing in the frame, calm and heavy, making its presence known. Amanda backed up so fast she almost collided with her friends. They stumbled, slipping in mud, suddenly very interested in leaving. No one got hurt. No one got chased. No one got touched. They just ran into something they couldn't intimidate. And my cameras captured all of it, her entrance, her speech, her trespass, her panic, and the retreat. That afternoon, I didn't post anything flashy. I didn't brag. I simply sent the footage to the sheriff's office and the HOA, timestamped, clear, and unarguable. And for the first time since this started, the responses weren't "we'll look into it." They were immediate. The HOA called me and suddenly remembered the meaning of private property. Animal control reviewed the clips and confirmed the cattle were behaving normally. The sheriff's deputy took my report seriously and filed it with the videos attached. Amanda tried to twist the story online anyway. She posted a heavily edited video where she looked teary and claimed she'd been terrified by aggressive cattle and targeted by a hostile farmer. But the problem with edited stories is they fall apart when the raw version exists. And the raw version did exist. Because she brought an audience. Because she brought cameras. Because she couldn't resist turning trespassing into a performance. And now that performance was evidence. Within a week, the engine sound stopped. No more sunrise roars. No more drifting through rows. No more dog in a milk crate. No more trash in my compost pile. Amanda didn't come back. Not because she respected me, but because she finally understood something she should have understood from the beginning. You can bully a person. You can't bully 1,000 pounds of cattle reality. The field got quiet again. The soybeans started recovering where they could. I repaired lines, reset markers, and walked the fence every morning with a calmer mind. And every time the sunrise broke over the hills and the land stayed still, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not the kind you get when someone apologizes. The kind you get when the noise finally leaves. And all it took was the truth, caught in full view, showing exactly what she refused to believe. This wasn't her playground. It was a cattle area.